The entire dining hall turned their heads at the same time, as if an invisible rope had pulled every gaze toward the same table. The billionaire Foster Creed, known for his ruthless investments and an even sharper tongue, had just lifted a finger toward the employee approaching with a steady tray in her hands. Waitress Celine Harper had barely taken 2 steps when she heard the sentence that sliced the air open. "Don't talk to me. Talk to my dog." Conversations died. Glasses stopped mid-air. And silence fell, heavy, nearly solid. On the floor beside Foster's chair sat Atlas, a golden retriever with flawless fur, an expensive collar, and a gentle expression. The only one at that table who didn't look arrogant. Celine blinked once. Then again. But she didn't flinch. For a brief instant, the kind of split second no one notices but that decides destinies, Celine Harper felt her stomach drop. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to belittle her in front of a crowded table. She had worked in restaurants since she was 15, she had seen it all: impatient chefs, cruel customers, insults disguised as jokes. But this time, something inside her weighed differently. She straightened her posture, tightened her grip on the tray, and let the humiliation bounce off instead of sinking in. She had learned, the hard way, that dignity is sometimes the only uniform no one can strip from you, not even a billionaire used to buying silence with fat tips. She lifted her eyes with a calm made of steel. The kind born when someone weak decides not to be fragile. The billionaire leaned back, satisfied, like a man who believed he had just proved a point. Beside him, the 2 businessmen, Spencer Cade and Brennan Aldridge, burst into laughter like children who had just watched someone trip in public. "That's right, girl," Brennan said, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. "Talk to the dog. Maybe he understands the menu better than you." The entire restaurant was listening. Every table. Every waiter frozen in the hallway. Every customer pretending not to stare. Celine stayed where she was, breathing just enough not to let her chest visibly rise. In front of her, Foster stroked his ego while running his hand over the dog's head. "Go on, girl," Foster added, tilting his chin upward. "Talk to Atlas. He's the only one at this table patient enough to listen to someone like you." It wasn't just humiliation. It was cruelty with surgical precision. For a moment, Celine Harper seemed to shrink, but she didn't. She lifted her chin. And what shone in her eyes wasn't pain. It was something new, something no one at that table expected. A flash of calm. The waitress tilted the tray slightly, breathed in, and said with the firmest voice of the night, "Mr. Creed, I'm just here to deliver your order." "Ah." But she stopped. Something caught her attention. Atlas was trembling. The dog, who had been calm until then, dragged his paw as if trying to call someone. And for the first time since the humiliation began, the arrogant billionaire stopped smiling. "And you? What would you do if you saw someone being humiliated like that right in front of you? Comment respect if you believe no one deserves to be treated that way." The uncomfortable silence that had taken over the dining hall seemed to give Foster Creed even more confidence. The billionaire crossed his legs, adjusted his expensive watch, and pulled his dog closer as if preparing to prove a personal point. "Let's try again," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Speak very slow ly, so Atlas can understand. He might have more capacity than you." The businessman beside him laughed, though not with the same enthusiasm as before. The cruelty was reaching a level uncomfortable even for them. Some customers at nearby tables looked away, pretending not to see, but they were still listening to every word. Celine kept her face neutral. The waitress, trained to swallow her pride to survive, simply straightened her shoulders and asked softly, "May I bring you anything else, Mr. Creed?" He lifted an eyebrow, as if challenged. "Yes. Bring a chilled Evian mineral water for my dog." Then he smiled. "But relax. Maybe you don't even know there's water better than the kind you drink." The laughter returned, rippling across the restaurant like small explosions of malice. Celine inhaled slowly. Every cell in her body begged her to turn her back and walk away, but she stayed. Not out of submission, but because she had learned that facing contempt with dignity is a silent weapon, often far more powerful than any sharp comeback. As she walked toward the counter, whispers rose from the surrounding tables. "That's absurd." He crossed the line. That poor waitress. The humiliation had become a spectacle. And Foster Creed seemed to savor every second. When Celine returned with the bottle of water for Atlas, she leaned down to pour it. And that's when something caught her attention. The dog didn't look at her. He didn't lift his head. He didn't wag his tail. Atlas was too still. Shallow breaths. Eyes fixed, as if struggling to stay conscious. The air around her chilled. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And the waitress was the first to notice. The laughter stopped. The businessmen exchanged uneasy looks. The billionaire's eyes widened, his arrogant mask cracking for the first time. This wasn't fussiness. It wasn't drama. It wasn't a joke. And in that single instant, Celine understood something no millionaire at that table had the courage to admit. Atlas needed help. Urgently. And she was the only one there capable of saving him. But what Celine would do next would completely change the course of that night and shatter Foster Creed's arrogance in front of the entire restaurant. The entire dining hall seemed to breathe along with Atlas' short, tense, almost suffocating breaths. Waitress Celine Harper took a step forward, her heart beating faster than logic allowed. She knelt beside the dog, bringing her hand close with caution. The animal's breathing was irregular, as if each movement required disproportionate effort. There was restlessness, excessive drooling, and a strange glaze in his eyes, signs Celine recognized instantly. "Sir," her voice came out firm, though low. "I think your dog isn't well." Foster Creed turned to her slowly, as if she had just spoken blasphemy. "What?" Celine didn't back down. "He's drooling. He's struggling to breathe." "Ah!" But Foster shot up from his chair in an explosion of anger that made the table shake. You think you can teach me veterinary medicine now?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. "You can't even serve a table properly." Some people shrank into their seats. Spencer Cade looked away. Brendan Aldridge wiped sweat from his forehead, suddenly ashamed to even be there. Atlas tried to stand. A weak, desperate movement. And slipped. The dog's body gave out to the side, as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Celine reacted before any millionaire could even blink. She dropped the tray on the floor and caught Atlas with both arms, preventing the animal from hitting his head. The restaurant fell silent. Not the silence of curiosity. The silence of truth. Celine Harper was holding the dog's weight, and in her eyes shone determination and knowledge. In Foster Creed's eyes, for the first time that night, appeared something new. Fear. Yes, fear. The billionaire looked around, searching for someone who could tell him what to do, but there was no one. He could buy hotels, stocks, entire companies. But in that moment, he had no idea how to save his own dog. The businessmen began whispering among themselves. "This doesn't look normal. The dog is really bad. She might be right." At the center of the dining hall, holding Atlas as if he were the last thread of humanity left in that arrogant man, Celine made a silent decision. The turning point would begin with her. And no one there was prepared for what would happen next. The weight of Atlas in Celine Harper's arms seemed to pull the entire restaurant toward a single point of focus. She held the dog carefully, then lifted her eyes toward the manager who had been watching from afar, frozen in place. "Mr. Aldrin," Celine called, her voice firm. "I need the pet first aid kit. Now." The manager blinked, startled, not because she asked, but because he suddenly remembered the restaurant actually did have such a kit, stored away for rare situations. He rushed to get it, nearly stumbling over his own feet. Silence blanketed every table, every corner. The attention was no longer on the arrogant billionaire, but on the young waitress who had taken charge as if her uniform alone were enough authority. The manager returned with the kit. Celine opened the box with quiet precision, like someone who had done this before. And she had. She knelt beside Atlas again, laying out gloves, solution, gauze, and a small vial. "He ate something he shouldn't have," Celine murmured, leaning closer to the dog's muzzle. The smell was strong, metallic, typical of high-fat food seasoned in ways unsafe for dogs. Probably a piece of food that fell on the floor. That can cause rapid intoxication. Foster Creed's eyes widened. Brennan leaned forward. Spencer ran a hand through his hair. No one was breathing properly. Celine applied a light technique to help stabilize the dog until a veterinarian could arrive. Simple, but known by very few. "How do you know all that?" Spencer asked, stunned. She didn't pause her work. "I studied animal behavior and pet first aid at the Community Institute," Celine replied. "I took the course because I liked caring for them. And because customers sometimes bring their pets." For a moment, Foster Creed's proud facade shattered like glass breaking in silence. He was a man who never imagined a waitress could know more than he did about anything. Especially about the creature he loved most, his dog. Atlas took a deep breath. Then another. And another. The dog was stabilizing, returning to himself, the shine slowly returning to his eyes. Celine smiled softly. "You're going to be okay, buddy," she whispered, gently stroking his head. Foster finally found his voice, but it was different now. Lower. Unsteady. "Why did you do that?" There was no arrogance. Only a small man standing before unexpected greatness. Celine lifted her face, her simple uniform glowing under the chandelier above, and answered with the calm of someone who carries truth. "Because respect isn't given to those who deserve it, but to those who need it." The sentence tore through the dining hall like a verdict. No shouting. No humiliation. But it shattered Foster Creed's pride in a way no one there would ever forget. The restaurant was still immersed in that rare kind of silence, the kind born not from fear, but from respect. Foster Creed, the billionaire who minutes earlier radiated arrogance with every gesture, stood frozen, staring at waitress Celine Harper as if seeing someone for the very first time. Atlas was breathing better now, lying beside her with calm eyes. As if recognizing the person who had saved him. When Celine removed the gloves and set the kit aside, Foster drew a deep breath, the kind a man takes when wrestling with his own pride. "And finally," he said, "thank you." There was no irony. No mockery. Only humanity, raw, unexpected, almost timid. Businessmen Spencer Cade and Brennan Aldridge looked away, ashamed of how they had laughed at the waitress just minutes earlier. Foster followed their movement, staring down at his own table as if it were the scene of a moral crime. Foster ran a hand over his face, like a man trying to rearrange the pieces of something broken inside himself. "I was an idiot." Celine didn't smile. She didn't agree. She didn't gloat. She simply held her posture, dignified, firm, respectful. The kind of response that crushes arrogance without lifting a single finger. Foster bent down, pulled a simple envelope from his briefcase, and placed it on the table, sliding it discreetly toward her. "This isn't payment," he said. "It's an opportunity. I fund an animal behavior nonprofit. They need people who care, like you. And if you prefer, there's also a scholarship to continue your courses." Celine looked at the envelope as if weighing a decision far greater than paper. She hesitated. Breathed in. And finally answered. "I accept, but only as recognition. Not as pity." Her words echoed softly, yet firmly. Foster simply nodded, unable to raise his eyes right away. When he finally turned to leave, pulling on Atlas's leash, something unexpected happened. The dog resisted. He didn't want to leave. Atlas stepped back twice, walked up to Celine, and gently licked her hand, pressing his nose against her leg in a silent thank you, pure, honest, impossible to ignore. The entire hall watched in silence. Some smiled. Others swallowed hard. Celine crouched down, gave him a quick scratch between the ears, and whispered, "Take good care of him, okay?" Foster watched the scene, looking small beside a greatness he had never possessed. The waitress stood. The billionaire gave one last respectful nod. And so, between the faint clatter of cutlery and the soft glow of the lights, the night found its end. Sometimes, the greatest lesson comes from those who say nothing. And from those who choose to listen. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue bringing more emotional stories every day.